Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph. Let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today. Grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, but most certainly grab your wine if it's the evening. Either way, let's get into it. Today's episode takes us to Bethesda, a community known for calm streets, quiet mornings, and a sense of safety that felt unshakable. Until one night, inside a Lululemon store, it was shattered forever. Two employees, a confrontation, and a crime scene so disturbing that seasoned detectives struggled to understand what they were looking at. But to truly grasp what happened, we must go back to childhoods, back to patterns, back to the early choices that eventually led both women to the same store on the same night. This is a story of two different journeys that crossed in the worst way possible. This is Two Paths, One Night. Jayna Murray was born in Wichita, Kansas, later moving to Houston and eventually spending part of her childhood in Australia before returning to Texas. She was the definition of adaptable. She blended into each new environment effortlessly. Jayna was an athlete through and through, a dancer, a runner, a hiker, a skier, a rock climber. I mean, she did it all the things that I wish I could do outdoors, okay? She earned dance awards, excelled in every outdoor activity, and attended four different high schools, fitting in each time like she always been there. By late 2010, she was 30 years old, living in Washington, D.C., and enrolled in Johns Hopkins, a competitive MBS dual master's program, all while working part time at Lululemon. Around this time, her older brother was deployed, and Jayna, being the devoted sister she was, drove all the way to North Carolina just to see him off. She even promised to send him a running shirt and a care package from Lululemon while he trained in Iraq. Her life was built around adventure, discipline, and academic excellence. Brittany Norwood was born May 19th, 1982 in Kent, Washington, to Earl and Loretta Norwood, parents of nine children. Her father ran the family's upholstery business, and her mother raised the kids. And Brittany, she was a star. At Decatur High School, she became a standout soccer defender, so good that in 1998 she was named one of Seattle Times' top defenders. She had strong grades, a mild, polite demeanor, but she was fierce and competitive on the field. She earned a scholarship to Stony Brook University in New York, majoring in sociology. But between 2000 and 2003, things spiraled. Theft allegations surfaced among teammates and roommates against Brittany. Eventually, she lost her scholarship and was asked to leave quietly in exchange for no charges. Over the next several years, a pattern formed. Personal belongings, beautiful items were stolen, allegedly by Brittany. Later, she returned back to Washington and moved to the DC area, where she worked at Willard Intercontinental Hotel, which was an affluent hotel there in DC. She rose fast to be the concierge. She handled pressure well until suddenly she quit. By 27, she was at Lululemon in Bethesda. Both women, similar beginnings, but internal battles moving in very different directions. On March 13th, 2011, a Lululemon manager tried to unlock the front door, except it wasn't locked. When she stepped inside, the scene didn't make sense. Chaos was everywhere. Cash register was open. There was money on the floor, glass shattered, clothing tossed all about, and the walls were damaged. There was even a TV ripped from its mount and bloody footprints leading to the back. She heard noises coming from the back and immediately stepped outside to call 911. Police arrived and found the women's restroom drenched in blood. Two women had been attacked. Jayna Murray was dead, and Brittany Norwood was alive, bound, injured, claiming to have survived. After her injuries were addressed, she was at the hospital and investigators needed to talk to her. She mentioned that it was only her and Jayna working the night before. They were to work from 7 until close. She said that Jayna closed the store around 9:45 p.m. and she walked to the metro and realized she forgot her wallet. So she called Jayna and Jayna mentioned that she also forgot her laptop. They both returned to the store. Inside, they walked to the back to search for Brittany's wallet. They searched for about 30 minutes and were unable to find the wallet. So Jada simply told her that they could look again tomorrow. And she gave her her Metro card so she could go back home. As they exited the back room, Jana was in front of her by a couple of feet. And that's when she noticed two masked men and they attacked both women. Brittany tried to escape, but Jayna was hit first. Brittany claimed that she was immediately dragged to the back and beaten and sexually assaulted. The men also stole cash, zip tied Brittany, and threatened to slit her throat. Now, she claimed she didn't know what Jayna had endured. However, she only heard Jayna screaming and fighting for her life. She was drugged to the back room, and Jayna was drugged to the women's restroom. Ultimately, Brittany blamed herself for forgetting her wallet and claimed they wouldn't have been there had she remembered to take her wallet in the first place. Detectives later described the brutality on Jayna's body as unrecognizable. Jayna's family, including her deployed brother, received the awful news. They flew to DC and visited the store's growing memorial and eventually returned home to Houston to plan a closed casket service due to Jayna's injuries. Before ultimately leaving, detectives promised the family they had a strong lead and they wanted to give them some type of justice. Hey, what's up, y'all? It is Steph. And before we dive deeper into our episode for today, I've got a quick reminder for you. We're growing our Murder in the Black community over on YouTube. And to celebrate, we're hosting a holiday giveaway as our thank you for helping us expand. It's super simple to enter. Head on over to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, pick any video, and leave a comment. That's it. You're officially entered. The giveaway ends November 30th, so don't wait, y'all. Tap the YouTube link in the show notes and join the fam over there. Let's grow together. Now, let's get back into our episode. Meanwhile, Bethesda was terrified. Police believe two violent men were loose. Security cameras at Lululemon? Well, there were none. But next door, the Apple store did. The footage showed two men dressed in black walking by during the alleged attack. And this is how Brittany described the two men. She said they were unknown race, but they were wearing all black, one taller and one shorter. And so when detectives looked at the Apple Store footage around the time of the incident, they noticed that there were two men matching the description that Brittany gave. They had their first major suspects. Now, detectives get a call from the tip line, and someone tells them they need to check out a man named Keith Lockett. He was always out bothering women except the night that Jayna was murdered and Brittany was attacked. Keith had a reputation for harassment, not murder, but definitely concerning behavior. So detectives canvassed the area there in Bethesda and met with a hardware store manager. He also knew Keith and mentions something odd that he saw Keith with a white guy on the night of the murder. And the white guy had a backpack. And in that Apple Store video, one of the two men had a backpack. And this felt like a break. Detectives discovered that Keith had shown up to a hospital soon after the murder, disoriented, injured, rambling. And when they tried to speak to him about the events at Lululemon, He didn't sound coherent. He couldn't even put two sentences together. And you have to know that the crime scene at Lululemon seemed targeted. It seemed planned out. And the fact that he seemed disoriented, well, this seemed just like maybe this wasn't their guy, but that wasn't enough evidence. They needed to make sure that he wasn't. So they swabbed him for DNA on the spot. Days later, Keith Lockett is eliminated. He was not involved and he wasn't present near the crime scene. And suddenly, their entire investigation shifts because the physical evidence wasn't matching Brittany's story. The crime scene looked staged, and the attacker, whoever it was, never left the store. Investigators began to see the cracks. Brittany's injuries, when they were examined, were superficial and they were parallel, almost as if they were self inflicted. There was no forced injury at the scene. The zip ties where she had been bound looked self applied. And eventually, when they found Jayna's car, they noticed that there was blood on the wheel and shift, a detail that Brittany couldn't account for, not on the initial interview. They realized that they needed to speak to Brittany again. It was time to re interview. Brittany walks into the interview room tense, very guarded. Now, detectives start with the car evidence because she didn't mention that in the initial interview. And she claims the attackers hit her several times over the head. So she apologizes for not mentioning the details. But as they walk through the story, she says that they demanded that she look for Jayna's keys and that she move the car. She claimed that she found Jayna's keys in her pocket and they told her which direction the car was parked in. Now, they trusted her enough to move the car on her own. And she claimed that when she walked outside, she had been hit in the head and sustained an injury that caused blood right in the middle of her forehead. She said she walks past a couple, and this is around 10 p.m. She also mentions that she sees a police car which was headed in the opposite direction. She moves the car and then returns back to the store. She claimed that the men threatened her, said that they could see her. If she was to do anything crazy, they would locate her. But she walks back into the store after moving Jayna's car, which is how the blood got into the car on the wheel and the gear shift. And when she returns, the door was magically unlocked. Now, detectives step out, leaving Brittany alone. And this story that Brittany gives, well, it requires the perpetrators to have psychic abilities. They inform her when they walk back into the interview room that nothing about her story makes sense, that it's unbelievable that she would walk past people going to the parking lot to move Jayna's car and no one says anything about her bloodied face. Not only that, but she moves the car and has an option to just simply leave the crime scene, or at the very least, flag down the cop car that she claims she saw. And Brittany doesn't deter from her story. She says she's not responsible. She doesn't know what happened and she doesn't know what to tell them. She simply denies any type of involvement under intense questioning. So, detectives offer to bring in her brother, Chris Norwood, and they leave both of them in the interview by themselves. Chris leans in close and asks Brittany, "Did you do it?" And she avoids him. He presses her again, "Don't lie to me. You need to tell me." And she claims again that she simply will tell him everything, but she doesn't want to do it here. So he simply says, "Tell me if you did it, nod if you did." She sheepishly nods, quietly apologizes, saying that she doesn't want to bring ruin to the family. And he begins to press her, "Why would you do this?" And she asks if they were being recorded. And this is when you realize that as much as true crime is popular, and even if you don't watch true crime documentaries at all, like the ID channel isn't your friend, well, you have theatrical performances in shows like Law and Order, SUV, Criminal Intent. Y'all, you would think that somehow somebody would have watched these shows, but clearly Chris Norwood doesn't. Because when she asks if it's being recorded, Chris simply says, I looked around the room and I didn't see any video recording. But even if it is, they can't use it in court. And bless Chris Norwood's heart because he was wrong. Asked if it was about shoplifting. And she shakes her head no. But the guilt is clear. He simply tells her that this could go two ways. She could say that she was temporarily insane, or she could say that it was self-defense. Eventually, detectives return. Chris Norwood leaves the room, and they tell her that indeed it was recording and they heard everything. And they insist that she simply relieves her conscience. Just tell us the truth, Brittany, they say. And Brittany, well, she does admit that there were no masked intruders, that it was simply her and Jayna in the store that night. And they did get into an argument. And they actually had a witness from the Apple store who was a nosy bystander who claimed that at the time of the murder, he actually heard two women inside of the Lululemon store who were arguing. He claimed that one woman was hysterically crying while the other woman was trying to ask her what was wrong. And after that, he really couldn't hear what else took place. Once they reveal that, Brittany simply shuts down and tells them that she wants a lawyer. Brittany Norwood is then arrested for the murder of Jayna Murray. Now, fam, I want to pause here and dig into something that comes up a lot in true crime, but rarely is explained, and that's kleptomania. The uncontrollable urge to steal, even when the consequences are huge and the items mean absolutely nothing to the person taking them. Because if you're like me, your first reaction when you hear about someone stealing something they could afford, something they didn't need, or something that could ruin their entire life is why? Why risk everything for something so small? But here's the twist. Kleptomania, real clinical kleptomania, isn't about the item at all. It's about the urge, the release, and then the shame that follows. Let me break this down. People with kleptomania describe the moment before theft as kind of an internal storm, a buzzing, pressure in the chest that keeps building. It's not planned. It's not calculated. It's not even about wanting the thing they're taking. It's the intrusive thought that pops up, almost like a command. Just take it. And once that urge hits, their ability to resist drops dramatically. It becomes an impulse control, a battle that many of them lose in seconds. When the theft happens, their brain rewards them. For a brief moment, there's this rush, a cocktail of dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline that creates relief, calm, and a sense of release. It's very similar to how someone copes through overeating, gambling, overspending, even self-harm. It's addictive. The act of taking something becomes a way to silence an internal tension. Not because they want the item, but because they want the relief. After the theft, guilt, shame, and sometimes full-on panic. People with kleptomania usually feel terrible after stealing. They don't brag about it. They often hide the items, never use them, or throw them away. But the urge always comes back. And that's what makes this a psychiatric disorder, not a character flaw. Kleptomania is connected to a few deep rooted issues: childhood instability or trauma, anxiety or depression, obsessive compulsive tendencies, low serotonin levels, perfectionism, and an internalized high pressure and problems with the brain's reward pathways. For a lot of people, the act of stealing becomes a symbolic way to take back control when everything feels overwhelming. Let me be clear. Kleptomania does not excuse theft. It absolutely does not excuse violence. Help us understand how a person can risk everything: a job, a relationship, their freedom, a scholarship over something so small. When someone with impulse control issues is caught, confronted, or embarrassed, the mixture of shame, panic, and adrenaline can create a dangerous emotional explosion. And in a few cases, including the one we're discussing today, that confrontation becomes the spark that ignites a tragedy. So when we look at situations like this, like Brittany, it's not about justifying anything. It's about understanding the psychological storm brewing underneath the surface that one nobody sees until it's too late. Because it's true crime. Motives aren't always logical. Sometimes they're chemical, they're emotional, and sometimes there's a lifetime of unhealed wounds crashing into one impulsive moment. Now, back to our case. Brittany's trial began October 26, 2011. Brittany admitted she killed Jayna, but argued she lost control, insisting it wasn't premeditated. But prosecutors disagreed. They believe she lured Jayna back after closing. Jayna confronted her. And here's the piece of the puzzle that I want to fill in about the night's events. First of all, Jayna wasn't even scheduled to work that day. She actually picked up a shift for a coworker, and she was scheduled to work with Brittany. Now, I want to remind you about something. Brittany had been working at a Lululemon store that was in a suburban town nearby in Bethesda. But she had recently been fired because she got too much merchandise using her employee discount. And they suspected at that Lululemon that she had been stealing, but they couldn't prove it. And so when she bought too much merchandise using her employee discount, this was a reason for them to execute her being released. But when they did, something happened. The manager at that Lululemon store then rehired her to work as a sales associate, but relocated her to the store in Bethesda. And that's where Jayna comes into the story. Now, what's interesting is that on the night that she was scheduled to work with Brittany, she actually called an employee that worked the shift before. And she asked her if Brittany had purchased some crop tops before she got there. And the employee said no. Well, one thing that the employee indicated to investigators is that they suspected that Brittany had been stealing, but they couldn't prove that she had. Ever since Brittany worked at the store, there was missing merchandise, things were coming up missing. They had no evidence. So when Jayna called the employee, they now had the evidence they needed because that night, right before the store's closing, she did a checking of the bag, something that they did often with their sales associates. And that's when Jayna saw the crop tops sitting in Brittany's bag with the tags attached. That was the proof they needed to execute Brittany being reported to the manager and eventually being fired. So this is what sparked Brittany's anger that night. And when Jayna confronted her about the theft, Brittany killed her in a rage, then staged the entire scene. Jayna suffered over 330 wounds. Brittany used 5 weapons. It was a hammer, a wrench, a knife, a box cutter, and rope around her neck. The medical examiner testified that Jayna remained alive through most of the attack, indicating a prolonged and frenzied violence. It wasn't until a knife was used did Jayna finally die. The jury deliberated less than 1 hour. Brittany Norwood was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Jayna's brother later received her care package that she mailed right before she was killed. Takeaway. As we sit with this story, I want to pull us back and really look at the deeper truth. The truth beneath the brutality, beneath the stage crime scene, beneath the lies and the panic. Because what happened to Jayna Murray did not happen at the hands of a stranger. It didn't happen in a dark alley. It happened because Brittany Norwood was caught in a cycle that looked harmless on the surface, a cycle that people often joke about or brush off, a cycle of stealing. People talk about stealing like it's petty, like it's victimless. Oh, she's just stealing a couple of things. He's a little sticky fingered. They don't mean any harm. But what we see in this case is what happens when the behavior becomes an addiction cycle. Urge, theft, relief, shame, repeat. She kept choosing not to get help. She kept choosing to feed the compulsion instead of confronting it. A pattern started when she was young, stealing from teammates, roommates, coworkers, and every time she slipped through the consequences, the cycle deepened. The stakes rose, the lies grew bigger, and instead of seeking treatment or accountability, she learned how to hide, how to maneuver, how to work around being caught. That's the thing about cycles like this. They don't magically resolve, they escalate. And bad choices compounded into worse ones, and then they snowball. So when Jayna confronted her that night, when she caught her with the Lululemon merchandise tags still on, knowing management already suspected her, Brittany couldn't simply walk away. Not from the pattern she built, not from the choices she kept making, not from the consequences that were finally closing in. She wasn't fighting Jayna. She was fighting the collapse of her entire secret world, the world built on theft, denial, compulsion. And instead of stopping the cycle, she chose the most violent route possible to keep going. We also cannot ignore the corporate piece here. Lululemon rehired Brittany after she'd been caught abusing discounts at a different store. Instead of addressing the issue or preventing future harm, they moved her, transferring the problem instead of correcting it. And that move put Jayna directly in her path. Companies have an obligation to protect their staff, their customers, and their environment. Sweeping employee misconduct under the rug doesn't remove risk, it relocates it. That failure doesn't make Brittany less responsible, but it reminds us how workplaces contribute to the environments where harm can grow. And also, we can't deny the college, Stony Brook University, where she went. They also relocated the problem without giving Brittany the necessary consequences she possibly needed in order to receive help. But ultimately, we're here to talk about Jayna. She is not lost at all in this story because Jayna did everything right in this situation. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't confrontational. She wasn't cruel. She was responsible. She upheld the store's policy. She protected the company she worked for, and she paid for it with her life. Jayna Murray fought courageously that night. Her bravery was real. Her humanity was real. And she did not deserve to die, not for merchandise, not for policy, not for someone else's compulsion. Her life should not have been cut short because someone else refused to confront their demons. So when we talk about stealing like it's cute or harmless or funny, when we treat it like it's a quirk, remember how easily it can grow. What starts as taking something small becomes patterns, lies, cover ups, deception, and in the worst case scenario, violence. This case isn't just about confrontation gone wrong. It's about what happens when a person in crises refuses help, refuses accountability, and keeps choosing the darker path, even when every escape route is right in front of them. Jayna deserved a life filled with adventure she loved. Brittany deserved help she never sought. And this community deserved the truth long before that night. Two women, two paths, one irreversible moment. Let's honor Jayna Murray and may her story remind us that cycles left untreated don't disappear, they grow teeth. I want to ask you guys a couple of questions before we end our story for today. When you think about kleptomania, that urge, that rush, that guilt cycle, do you see it more as a mental health crisis or do you see it as a series of choices that someone keeps making? And depending on your answer, where do you draw that line? My second question is, do you think Lululemon and Stony Brook University failed in this story? How responsible are workplaces, universities, when they pass a problem along instead of confronting it? Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and one of those questions will be included in our poll question for this week. Until next time, friends, this is Murder in the Black. I'll see you next week.